make a motion to.
No, I do definitely have comments. Okay. Well, for starters, Mr. Fehrenbach, just to, just to test, you shared that note with the council about 2 hours or so before the meeting, so didn't have a lot of time to think about a response, but even having read it and now sitting here listening to you again, I ask you, you are wearing your hat as our acting BA, and I appreciate that role that you play, and I appreciate the concerns you have about timing of the budget approval and how this can hamstring your ability to manage our costs going forward. So thank you for those comments. That said, I don't know if you're fully appreciating the position that I find myself in as a member of the council, in that I am an elected official. I am voted into office by at least enough residents to ask me to sit here and represent them. And my job, I believe, is in representing those residents, and not just the ones who voted for me, but all residents, is to question the budget, make sure I understand the budget, and do what I think is in the best interest of Bradley Beach. Now, you and I sat in 2 meetings in which I asked many questions. You've provided. I don't want to get into discussing, perceptions. I'm sure you feel more comfortable with the responses you provided than I do. But I sit here tonight, echoing what I said 2 weeks ago in the council meeting, that I'm not voting for any budget that I don't understand. It's just my responsibility. I'm a taxpayer too. And I'm a council member who wants you to be in a position to control our spending. When you said moments ago that the projected budget for this year is less than last year, you realize, of course, that last year's budget increased almost 10%, the spend, not taxes, spend, $1 million, when we were trending up to that point around 200,000 a year. We had a huge spike in expenditures, in part, in fact, almost exclusively, because we had substantial one-time revenue that came in. Interfund transfers. I'm not going to bore the people. The mayor mentioned this in his newsletter, but we had substantial, over $1 million of substantial one-time revenue. What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is we spent that revenue, and we spent it what should have been on one-time expenditures. What I'm saying is, if revenue and expenditures went up last year $1 million, I'm not criticizing for that. They should have gone down close to $1 million this year, when that one-time revenue infusion and expense incurral was behind us. So for you to say the spend is down this year, I would say maybe it's not down enough, because you're measuring against an artificially inflated 2022. Now, I appreciate your comments, but I am now going to read a prepared statement, because I'm going to say even beforehand that I think so far this budget process has been a travesty. I think it is. It has been a disservice to the public. It has been a disservice to the council. I'm going to read my statement. In his most recent newsletter to our residents yesterday, I was happy to see Mayor Fox pronounce the budget that is up for introduction tonight as prudent, practical, and manageable. The problem is, the mayor said something similar to the public back on March 8th, when it was announced that we needed a 20% tax increase, $1.5 million. At that time, the mayor blamed this increase largely on an increase in pensions and health insurance of over $1 million. However, the mayor's math was wrong, and those increases were actually nowhere near $1 million. Then we waited. A revised budget was not presented to the council until 5 weeks later, in an email dated April 17th. At that time, the mayor told the council that his team brought the tax levy down from 20% to 6.9%. Then, just days later, on April 21st, the mayor announced that the tax levy increase had dropped again, this time reducing from 6.9 to 5.3. Of course, this was announced at a hastily organized workshop on a Friday afternoon when many residents and a few council members could not attend. So let's recap. During the 7 weeks that have elapsed since the proposed 20% tax increase budget was shared with the public, this council spent 6 weeks focusing upon a bogus budget that never should have been shared with the public in the first place. Then, in roughly 1 week, our administration eliminated almost $1 million out of the original 1.5 million in projected tax increase. Does anyone else see a credibility issue here? So, while it's good to see the mayor believe that this version of the budget is prudent, practical, and manageable, please forgive me if I question his judgment. I had more comments about all the questions I've asked that, to my opinion, have not been answered. I'm going to bypass most of that detail to get to the final point, which is I cannot honestly sit here tonight and tell you that this is a bad budget. I also cannot sit here tonight and tell you that it is a good, prudent budget. This council and this administration should be working together. We all swore an oath of office to serve the public. We all should be sharing information and ideas to develop the best possible budget for Bradley Beach. Unfortunately, that has not happened yet. For the record, I am very willing to provide my yes vote once my questions are answered, and I am confident that this budget is serving the best interests of our residents. Until then, I will continue to vote no.
Mr. Mayor, if I just may, I agree with a number of the things you said, Mr. Gubitosi, but I believe that voting on this budget is not voting on its introduction. The introduction is essentially an authorization to publish and make the document public. It is not a vote on the budget. The vote on the budget occurs after a public hearing, which the soonest that can occur is the 24th of May. And so you will have an opportunity, one, to be able to go through with a fine-tooth comb all of the items that you want to. And the public will have an opportunity to be able to look at the document as it presently exists when it's published, when it's put on the website, and when, as the clerk indicated earlier, if somebody asks her for a copy, she'll produce a copy for them. And we can go through that review process. But the vote tonight is actually a vote to approve the publication of the budget, not a vote on the budget. The vote on the budget occurs when following a public hearing and any amendments that all of you decide you want to make to that budget.
And as a formality, I understand that. However, the budget that we would make available to the public, I would say should have been made available to the public in the workshop. The fact that we are being asked to vote for this to make it available to the public is once again a disservice to the public. That's my opinion.
But that's not the way the local budget law is written, and I would defer to Mr. Allison on that. But the local budget law that we have to operate under and function is set up to work in the way that I just described, unless Mr. Allison wants to add something to it.
Before you do, Mr. Allison, and I would welcome your thoughts. But before you do, this is a replay of an experience I went through on this council last year. And last year, I didn't understand the 1%, 10%, 5% rule, where once you introduce, you then can you have to reintroduce.
No, you don't have to.
If you make changes that exceed any of those thresholds.
The process is that in the event you have that 1%, 5%, 10% violation, you have to amend the budget by a vote that I think it's 3 days have to pass. You have to notice for a public hearing and you hold a public hearing on that amendment. You do not have to go through a whole reintroduction of the budget.
And what we went through last year, this administration continued to submit budgets that they had prepared to the DCA for the DCA's approval, even though the council had not approved the budget. 3 different times they submitted it to the DCA. So, and honestly, I'll come back to my initial points, which were it's been to me, it's been an unbelievably terrible process. When you and I sat down and discussed this, when I asked you my questions, you said to me, these are questions I'm looking at, these are good questions. I'm basically asking the same questions. You may have resolved those to your satisfaction. I still have not received any resolution to any of my more significant questions. So I'm sorry, but you know what? The mayor and this administration has got to show some respect for the council, and I would say for our residents. And they've got to engage us, share with us. You know, I know you know this answer. I don't know if the public knows. For all of the comments I've made and all the questions I've raised, including my statement 2 weeks ago at our last council meeting that I was going to vote no, I telegraphed. That is a person calling for help, begging for support from our administration. I got nothing. You know how many times public I have sat down and been able to meet with our CFO, Mr. Allison, this is for your benefit as well. One time, scheduled for 1 hour, it ran 90 minutes, so I got 90 minutes with the CFO. Very intelligent young man, no criticism other than lack of availability. I'm not blaming the HFA or the CFO. I'm blaming this administration. I have had no access to the CFO, and in the one meeting I had with him, I asked a lot of questions, and he basically promised to get back to me with answers. That's more or less where I've left it to this day. So now, Mr. Allison, I would welcome any comments you have. I don't know how close you've been to the process, but I will tell you that I think Mr. Menino has worked very diligently with Mr. Fehrenbach, with the mayor. I'm not saying because the administration has not worked very hard. I think they have, but I think they gave us garbage 7 weeks ago on March 8th. It was a waste of everyone's time. When the mayor said in his newsletter that now that we initially just captured the budget that all of our department heads requested, and then we shared that with the public. By the way, the council saw that at the exact same time the public saw that, so the council has had no input throughout. But at that time, the answer was, well, we just provided what all the departments requested. A $1.5 million tax increase at that time. I mean, does anyone think that maybe someone should have questioned that and said, hey, let's sharpen that pencil again before we go through this process with the public, before we embarrass the rest of the council and announce that we need a 20% tax increase? And then we waited 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, I kept asking questions about that budget, and I basically got no answers. I'll show anyone who wants to see the answers, anyone who wants to challenge that and say, no, Mr. Gubitosi, you did get answers. I will show you the responses. They were largely along the lines of, you can look it up yourself. You can find these answers. Look here, look here, look here. I sat in a meeting with Ms. Noble, and she heard every ounce of what I'm telling you, that I asked questions. I was told they were good questions, and then we never got answers. So at this point in time, I'd be doing a disservice to me and to the oath I swore to the public to vote for anything that I've had no input on.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. I'll make a couple of comments here. This 5 or 6 weeks you're talking about, as I've communicated, there was a lot of work done by department heads, made a significant amount of reductions, almost $200,000. We scrubbed the capital improvement and made cuts and made deferrals going out in time. And we did take a zero-base relook at salaries. In all those cases, we found about $800,000. That was a process that took weeks. I would say 4 to 5 weeks. And it was not a simple process, number one. Number two, this hastily called meeting on a Friday. We actually were accommodating one of the council people that could not make a weekday to have this meeting. So it wasn't, we didn't target a Friday afternoon meeting to eliminate attendance. It was out of necessity and trying to defer to one of our council people. Last Monday, we did provide last Monday morning a number of files that were at a detail level, which showed comparisons by year of the budget, which is supported by some of the workshop items or workshop presentations we did on Friday. To your earlier point about the first workshop, unfortunately, the first workshop was something that I pushed with the CFO and the BA, because at that time the BA was leaving. And I don't know if you recall this, but the BA was out for a pretty significant amount of time on medical. So did we have the time to do that scrub? No, we didn't. I made the call at that time to say, look, let's have a workshop, see where we are, and we'll certainly go from there. So yeah, there were some extenuating circumstances. I believe, and I'll stand by the fact that I think this is a good budget. I think we have 4 or 5 weeks to answer any questions and go through any questions that people have. And I'll just leave it at that.
I have a couple of comments. Just want to welcome the members of the police department that have joined us. Hi guys, I didn't know you were so interested in the budget. Nice to see you. And you know, as Councilman Gubitosi spoke, I was reminded of the fact that last year I felt like we were encouraged to introduce the budget and then we could change it. And then as we tried to change it, we were told, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. 1%, 5%, 10%, all that stuff. So that just brought back a memory from last year. So thinking about that right now. And that's all my comments.
Great. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Allison just comment on the 1%, 5%,
Oh, yeah.
10%.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sure, that there are certain amendments, so if you were to introduce tonight, and you have 4 or 5 weeks of which to further massage the numbers, get more into detail, and come back with amendments to the budget, amend the budget. Certain amendments, depending on their size, may require an independent public hearing, which means that you would actually, if this was 5 weeks from now, and you would pretty much say, okay, except for, we think that this budget is fine, but we're going to amend, but we're going to make a certain amendment. This amendment, according to statutes, needs to have its own separate public hearing. Then at the next meeting, you would have a hearing, public hearing on that specific amendment. And then if that passed, then you would pass the amendment and then pass the entire budget. A lot of amendments don't require hearings, but if it meets that, you know, what that 510 rules of thing.
And is that a standalone public hearing or can that be done in the course of a council meeting?
Oh, of course.
It can be done both ways.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, I've seen towns who want to get their budget out. We'll say, okay, we're having a special meeting just on this amendment, we're going to have it, whatever the closest date is, so that we can pass the amendment, pass the budget, so we can get going on the issues that the VA talked about as far as getting the budget of the ambulance system. And I think we'd be able to do this.
There was one other point that was made earlier about submitting the budget to the Division of Local Government Services. There is a requirement on the borough that following the introduction of it, that introduced budget be submitted to the Division of Local Government Services for review and for comparison against the annual financial statement. And they will then come up with, I've seen as many as 5 or 6 or 7 pages of questions that they want answered prior to a public hearing being held, because they want the opportunity to be able to make changes to the budget in the event the governing body's interested. So at least one of those reviews had to be done prior to the public hearing on the introduced budget. You would then have to make another submission to them of any other changes that might be part of an amendment. I don't know anything about 3 submissions, but I am familiar with the fact that there are, when there is an amendment, typically 2 submissions.
In the case of last year, we ran those things by the DCA to ensure that there wasn't any issues on their side.
3 times
Yes, 3 times, that's correct.
without council support of any one of the 3.
I don't know if you heard what Greg said.
No, I'm just saying, it's like, why
You're
waste
not-
everyone's time?
It's not wasting everybody's time. The DCA needs to put their thumbprint on it and say, we don't see anything any red flags. Am I wrong?
You have to make the submission to the division
Understood.
for them to be able to review it. That doesn't
3
mean
times.
that they're committing that the governing body is going to vote in favor of it. But they have to make sure that the division is going to approve of whatever is submitted to the
3
governing body.
times, I understand. 3 times, I understand what you're saying, sir. I appreciate it. But 3 times, and you know what was really offensive to me as a council member, an elected official who's doing his best to represent our residents. What was really offensive is that we were not getting our questions answered last year. We were voting no. These amendments, these edits that kept being made, kept getting resubmitted. And the whole time, the administration was telling various shop owners and so forth, we can't pay your bills right now because the council is voting no. And I was told that to my face. I was told that by other residents, that the word on the street was the council is tying up the borough's budget. And the problem with that is the council, all we wanted to do last year and all I want to do this year is to be included, to be a part of that process. You guys apparently think you know your numbers really well. You probably do. But no one has shared them with us. A simple question, ladies and gentlemen, I ask salaries and wages. Salaries and wages. We, the borough of Bradley Beach, should know salaries and wages. I say I want salaries and wages for 3 years. I want them by department. Any problem with that so far? No. Prior to allocating to the beach and the sewer utilities. That's important to me because once some portion of our salaries get allocated to beach and sewer, our record keeping loses how much is police, how much is DPW. I want it prior to the allocations. I'm told in response, that would be too difficult to create. I'm like, a budget process starts with the total salaries and wages. It's from that starting point that you make the allocations. But I'm told I can't have this total salaries and wages. And that's important. I'm not just trying to bust chops. It's important because if I don't know how much of the police or how much of the DPW got shifted to the sewer utility or to the beach utility, I can't tell how much total increase or decrease salaries and wages went up. For example, police salaries in our budget were going up pretty substantially. I want to say close to 10%. DPW salaries were going down. I'm sure a lot of that is because less was allocated from the police to the beach, maybe more was allocated from the DPW to the sewer. But I have no way of knowing that unless someone tells me what our total salaries and wages were. And if I can't get that answer, it says a lot about what other answers I'm probably not getting. So
at the workshop on Friday, if you look at the line item budgets that we handed out, the detailed budgets, the Excel spreadsheet, somebody asked a question about what was allocated to the beach. It's right there. Here's the police allocation to the beach. So I mean, it's a matter of adding 3 numbers together. But I mean, I don't know why we couldn't do the.
you absolutely should be able to do it. And
Yeah.
that number should exist. I have it in writing that it doesn't exist. It's got to exist. I played with.
Of course,
I'm sorry,
of course, the total salaries of the town.
by department.
Well,
Well, it must exist.
by whatever. Yes, by department and then by
Yeah.
allocation.
Yes, absolutely.
So I did, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, go ahead. No, Councilman Gubitosi, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I thought we did get an email that broke it down by employee, by name, that had the W-2.
Oh my God,
so
it
that-
was horribly flawed data. Ms. DeNoble requested it. She asked me to merge a couple files, which I did. Well, for example, 2 employees were not even included in the salary data. I mean, 2 that I noticed. I'm not gonna mention names, but they're both, full-time employees, both getting paid. The salaries didn't add up anything close to what the numbers were that we were looking for. There's so many flaws in the data that's been shared. And yet I know, because I've built budgets in my past, not municipal budgets, I will grant you, there's a whole new world of accounting rules and procedures. But fundamental concepts of budgeting aren't different, and I know you know that. And all I've asked for is the appropriated salaries and wages, and the actual expenditures for salaries and wages by department. For 3 years, I wanted to look at 2021, 2022, and 2023. The reason being 2022 was such an anomaly. There was such a spike, as we've all attested, including our acting BA, that 2022 was an odd year. And I'd like to see if that one-time revenue that we spent, I'd like to make sure that we spent it on non-recurring things. If I see a big bump in salaries, or if I see a big bump in other expenses that does not go back down in the next year, this year, 2023, I have a problem with that, and I want to ask more questions. But I'm told I can't get that number. If I can't get salaries and wages, I mean, what's the point of me voting? Why don't we just have the mayor and the administration set our budgets and submit them? Why are the rest of us sitting here? That's my question.
And I've tried saying that you will have an opportunity to take that position anytime that this budget comes up for a vote. But tonight is to authorize it to go out for publication and to begin the process that the local budget law requires of a 4-week review period. And we will have that 4-week review period. And if you don't want me taking actions to be able to control overtime, if you don't want me taking actions to try to move things along in this organization, I will spend as much time as you would like sitting down and go over each of these numbers. I think I am at a point now where I can give you what you were asking me for 4 weeks ago, but I made it clear to you 4 weeks ago that I had the same questions you had because I could not find the information. I think I have finally found the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. I think I finally put them together and they seem to make sense. Maybe you will end up finding places where I was wrong and we can make corrections in that. And I have no problem saying I was wrong. I made an error. I sent you out an email yesterday or today or something where I indicated that. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes and we learn from those things. But in order to be able to get this process started, there has to be an introduction of the budget. That's what the law requires.
The law requires it, and the council requires some sort of inclusion in the process. And speaking only for myself, no one has heard my vote tonight. And I telegraphed this 2 weeks ago. I've said it beyond 2 weeks ago. I said it publicly 2 weeks ago. So listen, we can go back and forth. I appreciate all the legal requirements you're trying to satisfy, but you know what? Somebody's got to show some respect for the rest of the council. And it has not been this administration to date. That's,
Okay.
I'll stop.
Are there any other comments? Okay, then we will move towards voting for 2023-137 introduction of 2023 municipal budget to read only. For the second.
I'll second.
Mr. Barco?
I just first want to say thank you, Mr. Fehrenbach. I think you explained some things very succinctly and I appreciate that. I am voting yes. I personally had over close to 30 questions that I asked the CFO and I got answers, but not my experience isn't everybody else's experience, and I recognize that.
Mr. Market, you didn't even share those with us. Did I miss that?
I can forward it to you.
No, thanks. Thanks anyway.
Mr. Noble? I'm still waiting to see a comparison between 2021, 2022, 2023 with capital outlays, budgeting versus actual spend over the last 3 years. I think we should have a roundtable with the public invited and really work this out, and I'm gonna say no.
Mr. Gubitosi,
Absolutely no.
Mr. Weber,
I will telegraph the thing that concerns me about the budget, and it's that the fire department is not getting what they are asking for. Not even the thing that was brought up tonight with the grant for a new truck, just their basic budget. They're doing.
I think you can explain it's a one-time, it was a one-time deal there with the fire department.
Last year and previous years,
You have the whole budget process to explain whatever you want to me. I just want to make a statement before I vote now.
But I thought you were asking a specific question.
No, I said I'm telegraphing my concern on the budget, that's why I'm voting no on this.
Mayor Fox.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.